The Diving Bell and the Butterfly by Jean-Dominique, Bauby. So this is a book that was originally written in French, and I'm not sure when it was written, in the 90s, I think, because this translation is from the 90s, the late 90s, and that's when I picked it up. It's a teeny little book. Not only is it small this way, but it's just a short little book. 125 something pages, 130 pages, and relatively big font. However, I don't blame the writer because he wrote the whole thing by blinking. So maybe you've heard of this, and I think they made a movie or a documentary or something about it as well. It's this guy who had a job. It's been a long time since I read it. I probably should have refreshed my memory. But this is what this channel is all about, is me showing how I don't remember anything or know what I'm doing. Okay, let's move on. He was like an editor of Elle or Vogue or something like that in France. And he suffered from a stroke, and he lost the ability to speak. And really he was basically paralyzed throughout his body, except that he could blink. And they devised a method through which he could communicate by blinking letters. And they didn't do it alphabetically. They were a little bit smarter than that. I know I'm not really showing the book off, but I'm just talking about it. They were smarter than that. So let's say it were English, and if the most common letter in English, and I don't know that it is, but let's say the most common letter is E, then they would have him blink once for E. And if the least common letter is, let's say, Q, or no, probably not, let's say Z, or Z for my Australian listeners, and anyone who's, I guess, not American, probably. Anyway, then that would be the last one. That would be the last. You'd have to blink 26 times, or however they did it to get there. And in fact, he makes a joke in this book. Mind you, he wrote this in French, and this is I'm always fascinated by translation, because the joke is that the letter J is the most, every sentence that a French person says starts with the letter J. And of course that's not true, but he says it because the letter J is the first letter in the word je, which means I. And he's making a joke about how French people, he's just joking, but he's saying, oh, French people are always talking about themselves. But how do you translate that? How do you say, he says, well, they just say it. They just say, well, the first letter, so they always want to start with the letter J. And anyone reading it who doesn't know that it's French or doesn't know about French would be like, I don't understand what they're talking about. But anyway, this is always a challenge in translation. Okay, so let's have a look at the book. It's hardback. It comes with this little dust jacket. And the inside is, it's nothing special. Very big, very easy to read font. And, you might think that it's depressing. It's not really depressing. It's just really fascinating. And he has his moments of humor too. And I remember he talks about, he has to blink. He has to blink to get to the letter, to get to the word. And he said, some people that he was blinking to in writing this book, they would anticipate what he was trying to say. So let's say he was saying the word book. So he would blink out B, O, O. And then the person would say boot, book, boogie, something like that. And then he would be able to give an affirmative. I don't know how he did an affirmative. But other people just made him spell it out completely. And maybe they thought they were doing him a favor. Like, I'm not going to jump in here. I want to have you do it. And so he would have to spell out every single word to the very last letter. He's spelling out photography. By the time you get to the H and you're still blinking, you shouldn't have to blink all the way to Y. Everyone knows that, it's going to be an S or a Y, right? But anyway, and he would have to do that. And he explains that he has to do that. And it struck me while reading it that he was explaining that he had to do that to the people that he was doing it with. He's sitting here saying, some people make me spell out all the words, and it seems possible that the person who was writing it down at that moment was one of the people who had to spell out all the words. Anyway, really interesting book. As I say, it was not depressing, really. It was striking and definitely worth a read, especially since it's so short. Even if you hate it, you'll be over with it soon. Sadly, the author died shortly after the book was published. But in any case, so I mean, it's sad if you know all that, but just reading the book is just, I found it really interesting. Okay, this is The Diving Bell and the Butterfly by Jean-Dominique Bauby.